Wassell. I'm with Mid-Columbia Fisheries Enhancement Group, and I'm joined today with Tara O'Rourke, who I wanted to introduce to everyone because I'm really excited to have her as a partner on the Teanaway work. Tell me who you are.
Yeah, Tara O'Rourke, I'm Habitat Biologist for the Yakima Beach and working in upper basin, so. Yeah, we've been partnering with SCS and joining working on projects with Becca.
And it's really nice to have the additional capacity. Glad to have you. Thank you. So Tara did most of the grant writing on this proposal, and so when I say something incorrect, just jump in and then let me know that's not right. But Mid-Columbia Fisheries is proposing an implementation grant on the Middle Fork Teanaway River in partnership with Yakima Nation and Department of Fish and Wildlife on land that's owned by Department of Natural Resources. Not a laser pointer. Oh, yeah.
You just really have to press it.
Okay,
It's temperamental.
that's where the smart water comes in. So the Teanaway watershed is located in the upper part of the Yakima watershed. It's in YRA 39. Have you had other proposals in the Teanaway so far? Oh, good. It's fun to be the first one to talk about the Teanaway. In 2013, the state of Washington purchased the land that had been previously owned by a private developer to be the first community forest in Washington state. So our 50,000 acre community forest, as I said, is owned by Department of Natural Resources, but co-managed with Department of Fish and Wildlife. And it's a pretty amazing investment in the future of the landscape. Prior to Washington's purchase, there were a lot of plans. There were plans for a new city to be developed there, a new ski resort, a new solar park. So things were definitely moving towards development. And now we have a shared resource that is managed for multiple purposes, including watershed protection. It's a key part of the Yakima Basin Integrated Plan to restore this area for both holding water on the landscape longer and for fish and wildlife. It's also got goals of recreation and continued agriculture and community involvement. I feel very lucky to be able to work on the fish and wildlife portion of the Teanaway Community Forest Restoration Plan. And I've been doing that in partnership with the partners that I described earlier, focusing on the forks of the river. The Teanaway has a North Fork, a Middle Fork, and a West Fork, in addition to numerous tributaries that feed into those. And those three forks have a long legacy of change from past land management. I tend to think that our most recent chapter of the story started in the mid-1800s with beaver extirpation. We probably saw a landscape that was very actively managed by beaver, a series of connected wetlands that would change. Beaver populations would move on, we would have more stream channels, and then we'd have wetlands again. So that system changed as beaver were removed from the system. And then we moved into a time of logging and agriculture in the watershed. The logging was initially done using splash damming. People familiar with that? Something I hadn't known about earlier in my career, but it's a pretty ingenious method of moving logs. It's letting water do the work for you. So logs would be felled and stored in temporary reservoirs. Dams would be created either out of earth or out of timber, and they would hold back a short-term lake for a full season of logging. And when it was time to move logs down to the mill, in this case, it was the mill in Yakima, the dams would be blown. They would be dynamited. And the force of the water moving out of the impoundment would be enough to transport those logs all the way downstream to the dam, to the mill. That's a lot of energy. So there were two things that went on there. First, things that were going to get in the way of moving the logs were moved out of the river. So if there were other pieces of wood that were going to block the transport, they would be moved. And second, the force of that scour of that water in many places in the Teanaway scoured the channel all the way down to bedrock. It removed feet of gravels that had previously accumulated there, so that now we have expanses of channel that are just bedrock. All of this stopped in like 1916, and we still see the footprint on the landscape. After the splash damming was over, we moved to railroad logging. So the channels had already been simplified and now they had berms built along the edges of them so that logs could be moved out on easy railroad alignments. And then in the 1950s, a lot of heavy road construction occurred. Well, the roads did several things. They increased the rate at which water made it into the rivers, because as you see exactly this time of year, our roads act as stream channels. So when water would melt off from the snow, or if we had spring rain events, they now channel much more quickly to the river than they would have, bringing more energy with them. And then the roads also act like berms or levees in many locations as well. So in some places, we have the railroad berm on one side and a road berm on the other side of the creek, really trapping the river in its location. I think, what did I forget? Oh, the grazing. Yeah, so, and then there's also a legacy of grazing. First sheep and now cattle, which has compacted the floodplains and decreased their ability to absorb water. So it's pretty awesome that we were able to catch this watershed and hold it for public good. But we caught it in a situation where it's not functioning the way it would have been before management or on a trajectory without management. And the partners who are working on the watershed feel both an opportunity and a responsibility to move the watershed back to its functioning state, to be able to provide for fish and wildlife and humans how it would have done before that long legacy of management. That was a long story, maybe sadder than I meant it to be, but it was supposed to fill you with optimism because there are a lot of people investing a lot of time, energy, and funding in beginning this restoration work. The surf board and the integrated plan, along with some other funders. First, I'm just gonna have to point, I was trying to not because it looks unprofessional, but I'm gonna have to do it. We first started in the North Fork. So in this stretch, about 4 miles of the North Fork Teanaway, we placed 2,000 logs, some in engineered structures and some in loose gatherings between 2019 and 2021. And have seen the results that we were looking for. We're seeing gravel start to build back on the degraded bed. We're seeing side channels reconnected. And most importantly, we're seeing beaver move in to do the work for us to keep things going. So we learned a lot from that. And we've been taking what we learned to start our work on the West Fork and the Middle Fork. We're not done with the North Fork, just so that when I come back in a few years to ask you for money for that one, you'll remember that I said that. But we're taking the lessons learned there to go to the highest priority areas in the West Fork. And we're gonna start at the top of the state ownership on West Fork Teanaway River, which is at River Mile 5.1 to 8. And this portion, the part we're asking for from Surfboard, is at the very top of that in the top 9/10 of a mile. This is an area where we know we have steelhead spawning. The radio tag steelhead between 2012 and 2014 spawned in this part of the West Fork Teanaway River. The North Fork Teanaway has been managed for Chinook for quite a while, but Chinook are not being successful in that system. So although we see a lot of yellow Chinook reds here, those dates are pretty old. And our primary focus is really on steelhead and on the resident life form of rainbow trout in the watershed. We did some work last year to compile the limiting factors that have been identified for the Teanaway watershed in regard to steelhead from several different documents. And so this is a summary list that pulls from the 2001 limiting factors analysis, from the steelhead recovery plan, and from a geomorphic assessment that we contracted for in 2021. And that channel incision, the disconnection of the river from its floodplain that I talked about from the land management, comes in each of those limiting factors analyses as a key limit on fish productivity in the watershed. That's tied in with having a simplified channel. So we're not seeing pools, we're not seeing ripples, we're seeing just uniform lengths of channel. Wood is a key player in channel structure and in creating habitat, and we're seeing a big reduction in that from what we would consider to be healthy for a system. And we're seeing it's described as flashy in the 2001 limiting factors analysis. So we're seeing water run off the landscape quickly and run out of the rivers down to the Yakima quickly. So we're seeing higher peak flows than we would expect under an unmanaged condition, and then lower base flows in the summertime. And those are tied in with having high summer water temperatures. This area, the West Fork and the Middle Fork, are considered as possible places for bull trout reintroduction. But the existing temperatures are too high to support bull trout in this area. So here at the top of the West Fork Teanaway on the state land, there is national forest above it. The project that we're proposing to you and that we have underway right now is focused on increasing habitat for steelhead. Improving hydrologic function in the river that will also benefit fish downstream, and then creating some resiliency to climate change in this part of the river. We discovered you should always take your drone photos in October because it's gorgeous. Everything is beautiful. So we flew the drone over this reach in October, and it really revealed several things. First, that the trees that burned in the 2017 Jolly Mountain fire are falling over and are beginning to recruit the river. But that there's a real lack of structure in the river to hold on to that wood. Because of the simplified channel, trees will go in and they'll move down, and they won't really have an ability to do a lot of work while they're in there. And so we're proposing to augment that wood that's coming in on its own with helicopter large wood replenishment. We'd be taking wood ideally from other parts of the community forest within a 1 mile radius. We may need to bring more wood in because the community forest was very heavily logged before it was owned by the community, and the wood that's available is pretty small diameter. But the engineers at WDFW who are designing this work are estimating 500 pieces of wood over this 9/10 of a mile of stream. And the very lowest part of the reach is accessible by ground-based equipment, but the rest would need to be helicopter. We've done this work in the past. So this is helicopter placement in North Fork, Manastash Creek. And then on the bottom of this slide, these are, I think 2019, but it was actually 2018, I apologize. These were all different places that were treated during the large wood fiesta in 2018 using the helicopter. And so it's pictures of what it looks like when you fly in sort of medium diameter wood and place it in clusters in stream. Our proposal would also include bundles of smaller woody material slash that we would then hand stuff into the logs so that we're creating really more diverse structures with more edge habitat and an ability to hold on to material that comes downstream better. The project reach is shown here. Flow is going from left to right. And this whole part was indicated in our assessment as large wood replenishment. So the wood will directly treat those limiting factors that we summarized. We know that wood can act, especially when it has small material incorporated into it. It can trap gravels and it can reconnect small patches of floodplain. It can reconnect big patches too, but there only are small patches in this reach of the West Fork. It's a bedrocky canyon with little pockets of floodplain and side channel availability. We know wood forms log jams to make pools and to more complex habitat. And over time, those things can really begin to dampen flood peaks so that what's experienced downstream is more hospitable for fish. And finally, we don't think we can cool the temperatures in the river by placing wood in there, but we do know that there's research that we increase the heterogeneity of temperature conditions in a river when we have wood, and we force hyperrheic exchange in targeted locations. This is some of that work we did in the North Fork in 2021. So the flow is going kind of from me towards the wood. We did an engineered log structure that then trapped additional wood that was mobile in the river, that then trapped all of those gravels on top of the bedrock that had formerly been exposed and is now building the bed back up in elevation. This work in the Teanaway is aligned with recovery plan actions and is aligned with a tag focus action, which is to reconnect side channels, not to artificially create side channels, but to target wood placements in a way that we recreate side channels.
So your argument on the focused action is, how are you creating side channels? It's just that you're blocking up water and that causes them to spill into channels more often? Is that what you're?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't even call it an argument. It's just, that's what we're doing.
Claim,
Yeah.
proposal.
And then this work aligns with the priorities of the citizen committee in multiple ways, but I just wanted to highlight that the work is focused on restoring tribal protected resources for the Yakama Nation. It is aiming at steelhead recovery, which helps with Endangered Species Act liability. This is tied in with large scale work in the Teanaway watershed. Multi-partners, again, WDFW is doing the design. Yakama Nation is coordinating the permitting and bringing funding. DNR as the landowner is making wood available and supporting the project. And then we have a technical steering committee made of multiple partners, some of whom were sitting at the table today, which is really ensuring that the project is aligned with its objectives. And then finally, challenges. As I said, the wood that's available locally is small. We are worried about having helicopter placement in that burned area, and we're expecting that we'll need to do a safety assessment to make sure that it is feasible, and there may be areas we can't treat because of that. And the reach is narrow and confined, so our primary challenge is to make sure that we're targeting our work in the places that make sense, and we're not putting wood in areas where it really can't do work.
Well, narrow and confined, that actually helps with the fact that you have small pieces of wood.
That's a good point, yeah,
So
yeah, they can
it
do.
means the smaller pieces may be
can
more
do more
appropriate
for
there.
it. Yeah.
And they may do as much or more work in channel in a confined area in terms of pool scour and gravel sorting
Yeah,
than they would in an opener area. So I wouldn't presume you can only work in that.
okay, so strike that last one, not a challenge, an opportunity. We're requesting $300,000 from Surfboard, and that funding is being matched by contributions from the integrated plan, the Yakama Nation, and $500,000 from Department of Fish and Wildlife, which is very exciting to have them on as full partners, both for technical assistance and funding.
Wait, go back. So is this not updated with the full 500,000 or am I just not reading?
It's here, tied together there.
Oh, okay, that cash and I got you.
So we will complete preliminary design by the Surfboard due date of June 24th, to make this project eligible for being part of this Surfboard grant round. WDFW is doing that design in-house. Our permitting is scheduled to be completed by a year from now, and we would do our in-stream work in the fish window of 2025. And then again, just some pictures of the way the burned wood is already working, and that our friends, the beaver, are working in this reach, which we wouldn't have picked out as necessarily being a place that's hospitable for them. So we know they're here already, they're already doing good work, and if we provide more materials, they'll just increase their impact on the landscape.
How wide is the river through this area? Okay.
Yeah, I would say like at low flow, we're seeing channel widths of 12 to 14 feet, I think. I don't know who else. Tara is so new that she still gets to go out now that the snow is off to see it, so. Yeah, and I think that's our final slide.
Yeah, this one was highlighting the trail that actually goes through the main channel, so,
Oh, thank you, yeah.
yeah. It's like, you do see some wood accumulations, but there's definitely some issues. It's still, it's, there's a lot of potential to hold a lot more wood and inundate these floodplains here that are disconnected.
Yeah. I think that's it for our West Fork, so we're eager to take questions.
So are there stretches in here that are just bedrock, stream bed?
Yeah.
And is that what it mostly is, or is it mostly gravel?
It's mostly cobble and bouldery.
I think 30% of the reach is bedrock, exposed bedrock.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Not most of them. Not like
Correct,
other
yeah.
beaches we know.
Okay,
Yeah.
Do you have a DEM or so, or a relative elevation model? That would be really helpful in the application if it's not already.
Yeah, WDFW is working through, so we have brand new LiDAR for this that we took in November of 23. And DFW is currently processing that and building those notes.
It'd be great if, yeah, they could add that.
It's fantastic too. It's a very cool product. It can actually show you the trees on the banks in 3D.
In your other fork restorations, have you guys had any issues with the ice dams moving them that we've had the last couple of years up there?
Not that we have known that that's what happened. The wood is moving, which is by design. It's moving and sorting. And so I would think there's probably an ice element on it. But I haven't observed it at the right time.
Yeah.
To see that happening. I did see ice dams working in the West Fork lower down, like by Carlson
Yeah.
Canyon.
The West Fork, I think, has had the most in the last couple of years.
It's been cool to see what it's doing up and down.
Yeah.
Questions online?
Oh, Elizabeth says, I think one of the SRFB review panel members that was out for site visits last year is working on the designs. We'll need to make sure he follows manual 18 appendix D deliverable specs.
Yeah, so Alex Uber is one of the two design engineers. I think
That might have
that's-
been a typo.
Is that what you mean, Elizabeth?
Yes, Alex Uber.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you. He's following appendix D and then also the BPA design timeline because it needs to go through the iterations of BPA review. And I'm pointing to Tara for folks who don't know, because the Yakima Nation is a partner and they're funded through Accord funds with Bonneville Power Administration. Their permitting nexus is Bonneville Power Administration. And so they bring in the technical expertise and permit review from BPA.
So Becca, when was the last detection of the steelhead in the West Fork? Or is there an array there?
It's not in a way that I know. Well, you just went to Gabe's presentation.
No, we didn't.
I don't think there's an array there.
There's not an array here. There was tracking in the tracking study, and I believe there was tracking up here. The best evidence we have of steelhead use is juvenile pit tags from the West Fork that then show up moving downstream through the Columbia River. And
So they're tagged and then planted in the West Fork?
they are caught in the West Fork, tag that right and return to the West Fork as part of Gabe's studies. And there's actually a pretty good rate, and we'd have to pull out the data for this project site, but throughout the West Fork, it's actually got quite a high rate of anadromy relative to other streams of the area.
I know I've personally seen them in the West Fork in the last several years.
The red data I showed are from 2012 to 2014, so those do seem dated now.
But that is the most recent, fairly comprehensive data. So it's probably still a pretty good indicator. Populations have dropped since then, so, things are probably more sparse, but that's what I tend to use as my, go-to for steelhead range.
Any other questions?
Just a logistical question since you're here. For access to this site, is this in through that long road through the private ground, or is this you go up past Indian Camp and stay on the DNR road until you're over the ridge?
I've only gone the second way.
Okay.
But we're going on Monday with the WDFW engineers and we're concerned about that hill climb that goes up after you cross the middle fork. And so we are gonna do some scoping between now and Monday to see if going up the private road and then up and over, which William says is possible and I haven't done it. Have you done it, Rachel?
I haven't.
Yeah, I don't know how to. go
That
about
is
it.
likely maybe too long for site visit. So if you can do us the favor of just get a sense of times and vehicles required so we can nail down.
Shane and I mapped it the other day, and typically by the week that we're doing site visits, I have found that road to be okay to go from the middle fork over. But we'll find out
Yeah.
ahead of time, not the day of.
Okay,
Okay, thanks.